Greetings, folks. This is Mason Weaver, president of LeaveThePlantation.org. We have a program we've had for years called the New Underground Railroad. We started it decades ago. We gave it up. We may have to restart it because of all the great, wonderful, exposed things that are happening in our country right now. Today is June 18th, 2021, and not my President Biden, has signed the Juneteenth celebration as a national holiday. I looked it up excitedly, hoping against hope that it would be named the great apology from Democrats to black people on the horrors that they've exposed on black people since the beginning of slavery to the day. But I wasn't surprised to notice that it was not going to be a Democrat apology to black people, even though every problem facing black people in America is a Democrat-induced control or continued problem. Every problem. So I wasn't surprised, but they're going to apologize for slavery by making us live up to their idea of slavery. They're going to teach our kids their notice of slavery, and we're going to be once again subjected to the whims of Democrats as it pertains to slavery, which is the norm. If you let master raise your children, he's going to raise your children to work for his children. So I thought I would take an opportunity today to maybe go through some real history on Black History Month and discover the true story of Juneteenth. In case you don't know, Juneteenth reportedly was a time that the Union troops showed up in Galveston, Texas, to tell the slaves that they're free, because those poor slaves had not been told by master that they were free. The purpose of the announcement in Galveston, Texas, was that, pursuant to the Emancipation Proclamation signed by Lincoln 2 years or so earlier, that slaves were free when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, and those mean Southerners kept those poor black folks working. Not exactly true. First off, the Emancipation Proclamation was a proclamation by the president, and he only controlled things that the Union controlled. It was only for America. The slave states that had succeeded were not under the proclamation. They were not under control of the laws of the government. They were not under the Union troops. Only when the Union troops showed up and confronted those Confederate troops and go back and forth, the one that won controlled. So when Lincoln announced the proclamation, the South was a different country. It was the Confederate States. They had their own constitution, their own president, and their own army, and a pretty doggone good army. So President Lincoln's proclamation did not include the slaves held in Union states. See, the reason Lincoln proclaimed the emancipation was that the Union was losing the battle. They were losing major battles. And the people were kind of wondering, why are we doing this? We're fighting our brothers to free strangers, and we're losing. What's the problem? So Lincoln had to wait for a victory. And when he had the victory, he gave them a reason to fight, because, folks, there was no reason to fight in the North. They didn't have slaves. The South had succeeded. They were now a free country to do what they want to do, and they want to be a free country without slavery. And now we're going to fight to bring those Southern slave trading Democrats back into it. See, these were Democrats. The South was made of Democrats, and every problem you see pertaining to black people, don't forget now, it's always Democrats. And it's never changed. So the Democrats decided to avoid the Union because Lincoln and these Republicans, this new upstart political party, founded in 1854, by 1861 had won the presidency, they had won the state, the U.S. Senate, they won the U.S. House of Representatives. They won the majority of state governors, the majority of state houses. They totally control America. A brand new party, only a few years old, based on a promise they made to American people. We will stop negotiating and compromising with Democrats. We're done with slavery. It's not a moral issue. It's something that we all should see, and we're going to free black folks. We're going to go South. We're going to make this change happen. It's going to happen as soon as you vote for us. 9 platforms in the original Republican Party. 6 of them said we're going to take care of slavery, and we're going to stop with the Missouri Compromise, the Kansas Nebraska Act, over and over again. They want a slave state and a free state. Slave state, and we said no. We're going to give you no slavery. And as soon as Lincoln was elected, the South had no choice. If Congress had convened, Congress would have immediately voted to make slavery illegal. So the South left, which is why Lincoln kept saying, I'm not trying to end slavery. Come on back in the Union. I'm not trying to end slavery. Because he knew and the South knew. As soon as he got those guys back in office, Congress will convene and there's going to be a bill signed by the president to end slavery. So they had to fight and leave. So they did. Now comes the Civil War. Those southern states who saw the Union troops coming took their slaves. Some of them took their slaves to a state that was Democrat controlled, but not a lot of attention given to it by the Union Army. The Union Army was being attacked out of Virginia. They were being attacked out of Alabama. They were being attacked on the East Coast primarily. That's where General Lee was. And the Union Army had to focus on General Lee because General Lee was the Confederacy. But once Lee had surrendered, those Southerners rushed their states, their slaves over to Texas. The entire state, not just Galveston. The entire state of Texas, run by, of course, Democrats. The state was run by Democrats, and so was Galveston. The Union troops wasn't just going to Galveston. The Union troops were going to Texas with enough troops to control Texas, the state of Texas. Democrat control, slave control. So when they marched into Galveston, that was the only recorded march. That was the only time slaves recorded what happened at Galveston. It's a statewide event. The general grand jury went into Galveston and read from General Order number 3, I think it was, proclaiming that the slaves were free because of the proclamation that Abraham Lincoln had signed 2 years earlier. The slaves were only free because the Union troops were there. Slavery only ended because the Union troops, the Republican troops, arrived. The Republican troops arrived to defeat the Democrat troops. Don't let them change the names on you, folks. It has always been us against Democrats to this day. Let me explain some things that Republicans have done for black people leading up to this war, including the war and the time afterwards. Republicans passed the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery. Republicans passed the 14th Amendment, which made black people citizens. Republicans passed the 15th Amendment, which gave black people the right to vote. Republicans started Howard University in Washington, D.C. that everybody bragging about. Republicans, no Democrats have started any black college. None. Republicans started Spelman College for blacks. Republicans, Henry Morehouse helped start Morehouse College. Republicans started Fisk University. You get the picture here? You can't name a prominent Democrat college started by Democrats. They don't want educated slaves, folks. Republicans started Shaw University. Republicans passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which gave blacks the right to buy and own property, fought against by Democrats. Republicans passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866, overwhelming votes with overwhelming resistance from Democrats. Republicans passed the Civil Rights Act of 1871, which gave blacks the right to buy and own property, and that was the turning point for black folks. That little small event was the turning point for black people. They passed the Civil Rights Act. The Republican Party passed the Civil Rights Act of 1871, protecting blacks from the Democratic founding KKK organization. 4 Democrat Civil War generals started the Ku Klux Klan to terrorize black folks and Republicans. Republicans passed the Civil Rights Act of 1875, which gave blacks the right to serve on juries. That was frightening for Democrats. Republicans passed the Civil Rights Act of 1857 and 1957. I was 7 years old then. And 1960. Republicans passed, it was Dwight Eisenhower that sent federal troops to escort black kids to school in Arkansas against the Democrat governor and city. These were Republicans that you guys are supposed to hate. We're supposed to be mean. Democrats oppose every positive action towards black people. Every single one of them. This is your Black History Juneteenth celebration, folks. Pay attention here. Republicans created 40 acres and a mule for black folks. How many times you heard about giving my 40 acres and a mule? Only when Republicans were in power. But it was Republicans after the Civil War that saw that act come to pass. But we have brought the Democrats back into the Union. And they had enough votes, enough confidence, enough stability to force that bill out. It was never passed. Can you imagine what turn of events black America would have had after the right to vote, the right to buy property, the right to sit on juries at the same time? But then you gave 40 acres and a mule in the South where the only skilled laborers were black folks, the only planters, harvesters, the only people the engineers, the only one that get the market, the count of the market where black people are now able to own property and vote and sit on the jury. Can you imagine what would have happened to black America had that 40 acres and a mule been the dream by Republicans became a reality? But we didn't, because we had invited the Democrats back to the Union trying to make peace with our enemies, and they foiled that effort. It was Andrew Johnson who blocked it. Andrew Johnson, and prevented former black slaves from getting that 40 acres and a mule. Remember that the next time these clowns start whining about 40 acres and a mule, remember your history. Do not expect anyone to teach you your history but yourself. Don't expect the government to do that, especially slave camp schools to do that. You, as an individual, that train your kids, your sons, your daughters, your history. That's the only way your history is going to be propelled to the next generation. You do not ever let anyone else train your kids. I don't care if Biden made Black History Month a gold standard. I don't care if the Democrats made Black History Month a form of education. I don't care. They will never train your kids to compete against their kids. It was Republican Senator Dirksen who was one of the main people who wrote the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I was 14 years old and I remembered it. And he helped that the law get passed. He gave a powerful speech on civil rights in 1968. And I remember that also. I remembered the fight over that civil rights bill. I remember the struggle in Congress. I was a 14-year-old kid. We lived so far in the country we could only get AM radio. So I wasn't listening to music. I wasn't listening to beat. I wasn't listening to Temptations. I had to listen to KMOX in St. Louis, the baseball game, St. Louis Cardinals, and Lou Brock and Bob Gibson. And then after the game, I'm listening to news talk. I remember the fight over that bill, the Civil Rights Act. And then I remember the Democrats had a convention, I think it was in Los Angeles, where they discussed maybe even giving thanks to Republicans for the overwhelming support of that bill. Now, the bill was sponsored by Democrats, but it took Republicans who voted in larger percentages than Democrats to put that bill to pass. And that was at 14. That was my first entry into politics, into thinking politically. Why wasn't I been told this? Because every one of my family was Democrats. I didn't understand why. Republicans favored the Civil Rights Acts, the Voting Rights Acts. This is what we do, folks. That's who we are, and that's how we became who we are. Republican Party has always been the party for freedom, but because we're the party for freedom, we're not going to take care of you. People ask me all the time, so Mason, what have Republicans done for black people? My answer is nothing. We don't own any black people. Ask your slave master what he would do for you. Because he got you thinking that you got to beg for minimum wage. You got to beg for low-income housing. You got to beg for him to take care of your welfare. You got to beg for medicine. Because he got you sitting on your behind, waiting to pick his cotton for him. And everything you need as a slave, you have to go to master to get. And you depend on him. You honor him. You respect him. You believe everything he says about himself and about you. Stop that. Leave the plantation. Those slaves, our ancestors, had to get up and go out into the darkness to leave the plantation, frightened because master said you're going to die out there. And those who got away and got north and saw freedom had to go back. They had to go back with a bounty, dead or alive, on their head to knock on that door and say, Master is lying to you about freedom. Master said freedom is bad. Master said those Republicans want you to die. They're not going to give you a job. Do you really think that white people up north will give you a job over black people up north? You think they're going to treat you better because you're away from me? I feed you here. Your mom and dad died on my plantation. I take care of you. That's my job. I love you folks. Stay in this plantation. But those who got away came back. It took those who escaped to come back. It takes your daddy, your cousin, your sister, your mother to come back and knock on your door. You know who they are. They say, Master is lying to you. I have been to freedom. And it's real. Take my hand and we'll go back to freedom together. You will leave this place. And even that took courage. Today, black folks have left Democrats' plantation. We have left on the underground railroad of schools and education and motivation. We've gone to business and we've discovered that everything we think we can do, we dominate in spite of Democrat control, in spite of white people. We think we can play basketball, and in spite of them not wanting us to, we dominate the NBA. The same thing with football and basketball and track and field and singing and dancing in Hollywood, even the negative things, selling dope and pimping women. We dominate if we think for ourselves. So what would happen, black folks, if you thought you could stay married to the same female 35, 40 years? What would happen if you thought you could take care of your children better than anybody else? What would happen if you thought that you can go into a business other than pimping and selling dope and paying your taxes and building your community up? We do not need to be educated. We do not need someone to tell us our history. We need to understand who we are as humans. We're independent and free when we stand up and act like it. When we act like we're free, we are free. No one is going to free you. Why would anybody free you? Why would somebody else? It took an act of God to get those white men up north. Can you imagine the kind of spiritual change in heart to get you to take up arms, to march to your brother's home and destroy his home, to free strangers in his home? That had never happened in any civil war in our history. That was God Almighty answering the prayers of those black slaves in those fields, singing the Lord's Prayer, singing the praises of God. Those Union troops, those Democrats saw those Union troops marching to battle against them, singing glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. There was a spiritual movement. There was an invasion of Christian people. It was led by the Spirit of God. It was the only way the North could have won that war, folks. And we gave that back to evil. We gave that power back. 360,000 white men died freeing black men. And some of you clowns think we gotta get an apology for them and call reparations. Some of you think that they owe us something now. You kidding me? 360,000. We lost more men in that war than all the wars you've ever had. That was a spiritual battle, folks. And we won it spiritually, and we gave it back to them. And now we're in the spirit of them again. We're now serving the Master again in our food, in our living, in our marriage. I saw a chart that said the unemployment rate or the poverty rate for black folks is around 20%. That's high. But 80% of us are middle class. Just about. About 35% is middle class. I mean, 75% of us are now working with a 401k program, with a retirement program, with college programs for our kids in our bank. 75% of us go to work every morning paying them taxes. We see the gas prices going up. We understand the difference between the Republican administration and the Democrat administration. 75% of us can no longer be food. We have left the plantation. We have hope for the future. We think we're going to retire our money in our pocket. We think that about ourselves. And everything that we think about ourselves, we dominate for ourselves. So black folks, celebrate Juneteenth. But you owe those slaves something. You owe those slaves something. They shivered in fear to even think about things that you take for granted right now. They shiver in fear. It was against the law for a black man to even read and write. It was against the law for a black man to look a white man in the eye and speak to him. 40 doggone lashes. We stand up tall now. We're the richest black people on this planet. We're the healthiest black people on this planet. We're the most influential over our government than any black people on this planet. The black man is 7% of the population. 7%. But 25% of the biggest, baddest, toughest military this world has ever seen. We're aggressive. We're positive. We're patriotic. We're strong. We're trained. We're motivated. We're intelligent. We're educated. So you tell me why, after serving, protecting Afghanistan, protecting Israel, protecting South Korea, protecting Asia, protecting the whole planet, why do black men come home and let Pook and Ray Ray run their family around? Somebody tell me that. We can solve this problem in our community ourselves in 1 year. In 1 year. You turn those honorable discharge veterans loose on your neighborhood. Every black man that's served with distinction in the military, every black man that's discharged with an honorable discharge, you let him also take home his firearm. I mean, if we can walk the streets of Afghanistan, if we can take over the Middle East, if we can protect and stand between communism and America and Germany, if we can go to Europe and stare down China, if we can do that, doggone it. Pookie and Ray Ray don't stand a chance. It's not going to take a government program. It's going to take black men who are educated, trained, and motivated, and disciplined. Just give him back his firearm. Just say, go on home, dude. Take care of your wife and kids. Take care of your baby girl. Take care of your sons. Just go on home. Because Pookie and Ray Ray only attacks when Pookie and Ray Ray is got your woman by herself. So I'm telling you, folks, the black community, our success, our future, had better be up to us. Or we don't have one. My name is Mason Weaver. If you don't like what I'm saying, that's your business. But if you do like what I'm saying, join us at leavetheplantation.org. It's time to gather up and leave the plantation. We're going to have a new underground railroad that's going to be escorting those who want to be free. Only those who want to be free. I do not care to hear from you. If you're going to explain to me how good master is to you, stay a slave. Up to you. But those of us who want to go to freedom, those of us who want to control that part of America, those of us, folks, the poverty rate of black people, as I said, is about 20%. But guess what happens? Guess what happens when you marry that woman? The only place you can find these statistics, by the way, is the federal government, because that's the only ones that count everything. They count the deaths, the births, the sickness. You go to uscensus.gov and verify what I'm telling you. It's about 18.3, I think it is, the poverty rate of black people. But when you get married, dude, just the act of getting married, it drops to about 7%. 7%. Because we're running right here shacking up. They don't count those two salaries. Our poverty rate drops 2/3 if you just get married. So it's just time, this is us. It's on us. It's time for us to recognize we are the problem and we are the solution. It's us. Join me. leavetheplantation.org. Join me. Read the books. Look at the videos. Sign up for the newsletter. Let's do this together. It's our journey. We owe it. We owe it to those who just dreamed of this opportunity. You can go to school now. It's impossible. It's time for us to stop. It's up to us. So Joe Biden, you can keep your black history. You can keep the Juneteenth celebration. We're going to celebrate every place because we are free, because we're free indeed. This is Mason Weaver. You stay right or be left. We're going to go to freedom. God bless you. See you later.